Before I turn to the topic of today's hearing, I have to note that we're now just a matter of days away from returning to our districts and declaring an end to the 113th Congress. This Congress began with incredible promise. Just days after the 2012 election, Speaker Boehner declared, quote, "This issue of immigration reform has been around far too long," and he said, quote, "A comprehensive approach is long overdue," unquote. Unfortunately, immigration reform will have to wait a little longer because for the second time in 8 years, Republican leaders in the House have refused to bring to the floor an immigration bill passed by the U.S. Senate with strong bipartisan support. Of course, that isn't all that we're leaving undone. This summer, when the President requested emergency spending to respond to the increased number of unaccompanied children apprehended along our southwest border, Republican leaders in the House chose not to pass a clean bill providing necessary funding and instead paired a spending bill with dangerous language rolling back long-standing protections for unaccompanied children fleeing violence and persecution. And in the next few days, the House is expected to pass a so-called Cromnibus, a bill that provides annual appropriations for every aspect of the federal government except for the department in charge of Homeland Security, emergency management, presidential security, and the like. We're told that the irresponsible politics of brinkmanship is a thing of the past, but withholding long-term funding for the Department of Homeland Security seems motivated by the desire to revisit the issue of immigration when Republicans have a larger majority in the House and control of the Senate. It looks like the politics of brinkmanship may just be on temporary hold. We will see in a few short months. On today's hearing, I think it's worth noting that although the hearing title refers to the impact on local communities of the release of unaccompanied children, only one of the bills that we will be hearing about on the first panel addresses that point. The bills introduced by Representative Barletta, Representative Olson, and Representative Sensenbrenner, our longtime colleagues on the Judiciary Committee, deal exclusively with the process by which the federal government contracts with providers to house unaccompanied children in the custody of the Office of Refugee Resettlement within the Department of Health and Human Services. Children housed in such facilities are under staff supervision at all times and are not integrated into the local community. They do not attend public schools. They receive all of their food, shelter, clothing, education, and medical services in accordance with the terms of a contract or grant managed by HHS. Now, over the summer, when the country became focused on the spike of unaccompanied children arriving in Texas, many communities generously offered to locate HHS facilities to house these children. In my own district, Representative Mike Honda, Anna Eshoo, and myself joined together with the mayor of San Jose, the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors, and others to issue a statement expressing our willingness to help. However, some communities reacted very negatively when HHS was trying to locate temporary shelters so that the agency could comply with its legal requirements and we could avoid the terrible situation of having little children in cold, crowded, concrete Border Patrol cells for weeks, literally weeks on end. Now, I think much of the objection was motivated by fear, but I think a good bit may also have been motivated by a misunderstanding about precisely what was being done. Now, I believe some communities may not have understood that placement in an ORR facility pending release to a sponsor, and again, in compliance with longstanding legal requirements, would not result in a flood of children enrolling in school and receiving medical services at the local emergency room. If anything, locating an HHS shelter in a community may provide job opportunities and demands for goods and services. So I hope we can clear that confusion up today. One final point on these bills. I certainly do not object to the idea that the federal government should consult with state and local governments and increase the engagement of local communities. Like many members, I was frustrated at times this summer by HHS failure to provide clear information to the public and to members of Congress regarding the need for additional housing. For communities like mine that wanted to be part of the solution, that wanted to bring children to Santa Clara County and help take care of them, the lack of information was counterproductive. But I do have concerns about the ways several of these bills would impose the notification and consultation requirement. Erecting substantial bureaucratic hurdles before HHS can award a grant could prove very troublesome and mean that children will be backed up in Border Patrol holding cells, which is really not suitable. Having visited these Border Patrol stations over the summer, and to see these small children, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids, jammed in, sleeping on the floor, it's really a national disgrace. And so many of these children have fled record violence in Central America. Their treatment and holding in these cells is really not something that we want. Now, of course, when a child is released to an appropriate sponsor in accordance with current law, it will have some impact on local community. The Supreme Court has long held that all children, regardless of status, are eligible to attend public school. And as the chairman has said, often these children may require additional ESL services, for example. Every single state, including the District of Columbia, received at least one child who was placed in the custody of a suitable sponsor. But over half the children were placed with sponsors in just a few areas: California, Florida, New York, Texas, and the D.C. metro area. These are the areas with large Central American immigrant communities. And importantly, many of these communities most heavily impacted have responded to the situation in a responsible and compassionate manner. I would note also that the omnibus that is before us provides $14 million in funding, new funding for schools that have experienced a significant increase in the number of immigrant children enrolled in the current school year, a recognition that we should share in the additional burdens that schools will face in taking care of these children. With that, I would yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Ms. Lofgren.